Could studying in the Metaverse be the next big trend? Welcome to the Daily Forkast, June 6, 2022. I'm Megha Chaddah of Forkast, covering all things blockchain. Step aside old-fashioned libraries and cafes. Students in South Korea are now embracing the Metaverse as a way of focusing attention on their exam preparations. But why? We'll take a look at that plus a whole lot more coming up. Let's get you up to speed from Asia to the world.
Join thousands of NFT traders who already start their day on CryptoSlam.
Let's kick off with a setback for the Web3 lifestyle app StepN. The move to earn blockchain game took a stumble as it suffered a distributed denial of service or DDOS attack during an anti-cheating update over the weekend. According to a Twitter thread, an attack of 25 million messages led to hours of server shutdowns, with some users misidentified as bots and kicked out from the platform. StepN, which pays owners of its NFT sneakers for moving, said the update will help reduce the number of fraudulent users and spammers that were manipulating the in-game mechanics to earn crypto rewards. The company apologized for the inconvenience, announcing a double energy event to help users earn more and recover any temporary losses. StepN hopes users will run back to the platform as the Solana-based currency GST has slid more than 60% over the past month due to fears surrounding the play-to-win token model and the move to limit services in China. Meanwhile, people in Australia could soon be paying local taxes in Bitcoin. That's according to the mayor of the country's Gold Coast. Tom Tate suggested that accepting the cryptocurrency to cover council rates or local property tax could secure the city's future. He said, quote, "It sends a signal that we are innovative and bringing in the younger generation." Opponents of the move have suggested the volatility in Bitcoin price and the crypto market in general should rule it out. Tate dismissed the criticism and said fluctuations in prices weren't that bad. Tax payments in Bitcoin are already accepted in El Salvador and the Central African Republic, where the cryptocurrency is legal tender. The Gold Coast is a popular tourist destination in Australia, and the move comes after rival spot Byron Bay opened up the country's largest Bitcoin mining operation. You can of course find the latest on what's happening with Australia and crypto at Forkast.News. Over in South Korea, studying in the Metaverse is the latest developing trend. Forkast Danny Park takes a look at how exactly students are doing that and how one tech company is addressing safety issues such as harassment in the virtual platform.
According to local media reports, many students studying for their school or national exams in South Korea today are entering the Metaverse with their cameras and microphones turned on before proceeding with their study plans for the day. Some students say studying in the Metaverse helps them concentrate better, as well as allowing them to keep watch on others as if they were studying together at a library or a cafe. Some even shared that they feel studying with others in the Metaverse makes them feel more conscious of how much effort they are putting into studying as they are being watched. Another user told local media that they feel more comfortable in the Metaverse than studying at a library or a study room because there is no need to wear masks or to watch the noise level. One of the most visited platforms for this purpose is Tagroom, a domestic platform built solely for users who want a virtual environment to accommodate their studies. Meanwhile, South Korean internet giant Kakao has retracted its plan to endorse remote working in the Metaverse from July. Kakao employees claimed the new system is too domineering, as they were asked to be connected with their teammates via audio during their working hours from 1 to 5 p.m. But with the use of the Metaverse becoming more and more mainstream in South Korea, safety issues such as harassment in the virtual platform have arisen. To address this, Naver-Z, the developer of the Zepeto Metaverse, which has a monthly active user base of 20 million people, has partnered with Connect Safely to create a safer Metaverse. Connect Safely is a US-based non-profit organization which educates users of connected technology how to guard their safety, privacy, and security. In a statement, Naver-Z said the partnership aims to equip users with trusted resources and safety tips, as well as ensuring that all its features, products, policies, and processes are driven with user safety as their highest priority. For Forkast, I'm Danny Park.
All right, taking a look at Crypto Rising now, where every week we take a deeper dive into the current crypto landscape, looking into the opportunities and challenges ahead. Now, according to data from BitInfo charts, last week saw Ethereum gas fee hitting their lowest level since August 2021. But what triggered the fall and what does it mean for investors? Joining us is Annabelle Huang, Managing Partner of Amber Group. Great to have you with us, Annabelle.
Great to be here as well.
So Annabelle, there are many possible reasons why gas fees are so low. The tumble in crypto markets triggered by the conflict in Ukraine, inflation concerns, waning interest in NFTs, or increased competition in the field with the rise of alternative platforms offering the same service at lower costs. What are your thoughts?
So at the time that we're speaking right now, the Ethereum gas fee has dropped down to around 50 gwei, or less than $2 in terms of transaction fees for the very simple transactions, a level that we haven't seen in a long time. I do agree that it's a result of essentially the market downturn triggered by a lot of macro factors, such as the geopolitical conflict and a lot of the macro actions by the Fed. As a result, the on-chain activities has died down quite a bit. In terms of DeFi actions, we can see from the total value locked and the transaction volumes on different DEXs, as well as in NFTs. We're seeing across the board 30 to 40% decrease in all the on-chain activities, which resulted in the low gas fee.
Now, you might expect a fall in gas fees to tempt traders back into making transactions that are seen as gas heavy, like buying an NFT on OpenSea or trading on Uniswap. So, are we seeing an increase in the number of daily users on the Ethereum network? And if not, why not?
I don't think we are seeing that because, in fact, I think gas fee is a function of the supply demand for block space on chain, which is a function of the user demand for different activities on chain. Because of the price correction, I think there has been a lot less activity happening. People have less demand to trade, to buy things, either DeFi tokens or NFTs, which is the reason why gas fees has dropped. Now, with gas fee at an all-time low, some of the users might start to do a few of the transactions that have been waiting, given the cost is lower. But I would say the broader market demand has decreased quite a bit. So unfortunately, I don't think the low gas fee will actually drive more active user at this stage. I think it will still be broader market driven.
Ethereum co-founder Vitalik Buterin recently said that the long-awaited Ethereum merge, which will see the blockchain moving to a proof-of-stake model, might happen in August, but there could be a delay. Now, there's been a lot of debate about what impact the merge will have on gas fees, if any. What are your thoughts on whether the current low fees could delay that plan, and how might fees actually differ once it does happen?
All of us were not strangers to delays in a lot of these timelines, but I am very hopeful that E2 of the merge will happen. But bear in mind, that's the initial stage for the Ethereum to move from proof of work to proof of stake. And the changes are happening at the consensus level, changing the consensus mechanism. And the immediate effect on gas fees, I would say, is not apparent yet. It's not guaranteed that will significantly lower the gas fee already as the merge happens. But the road or the vision, the roadmap that Ethereum has is eventually, as we implement further changes like proto-dank sharding or eventually dank sharding, that it will make the chain a lot more scalable and therefore a lot more affordable to use for users.
Thanks, Annabelle, for explaining all of that to us today. And that's the Daily Forkast from our vantage point right here in Asia. For more, visit Forkast.News. I'm Megha Chaddah. Until next time.